Okay. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Novel Idea Society for October. I'm Sam Maciag, and this is HP Bayne.
Hi.
Or if you've lived in Regina for a long time, you know her as Heather Polishuk, a longtime reporter with the Regina Leader Post. She was a crime reporter for years before making a go of writing full-time. It's now your full-time job.
I am full-time writing. It's brilliant. Yeah.
So we are here to talk about Edge Creek Light. And I, in Sam fashion, read it, finished it yesterday, because if I read them too soon, I forget what they're about. But I have to ask this, is this based on PA?
Oh, absolutely. St. Louis Light. Yeah, absolutely.
So
Yeah.
because you've written a lot of books already.
Yes, I was just gonna as I told you, because you read it yesterday, so you wouldn't forget. I have to apologize ahead of time. I wrote this a while ago and I've written a lot since, so if I forget some details, apologies. So I did review a little bit, trying to remember all this stuff, but yes. Anyway,
so where did this stand in the priorities of paranormal stuff for you?
The light itself?
Yeah.
Well, I'd wanted to write about it for a while because I used to go up there quite a bit, honestly. Like I worked when I first started in reporting, I started actually at the Prince Albert Daily Herald. So I used to it's kind of a weird thing. I used to sort of drive by, like I'd go visit my parents for the weekend, and when I was going back to Prince Albert for the week, I would pop in at sometimes just drive by the St. Louis Lights where the site is, just to see what it was doing, because it was kind of one of those interesting things. I've always been a little bit fascinated by
Have you
ghosts.
seen them?
I have. I have seen the light. I've seen the light. No, I've seen it. I've been there a few times. I've always seen something, and I've always found it interesting because it always seems to do different things depending when I go. So anyway,
tell me what you mean by that.
Well, it's sort of an interesting phenomenon. I like sometimes when I would go, it would be just sort of a bit of a, when you see a train light coming at you and before it hits the horizon, you just see a glow. Sometimes that's all I would see. It was just this like almost like a glow that wouldn't quite come out. Other times I would go and you'd actually see this bright white light, like, on the front of a train, basically. So there'd be a glow and then the white light. And then sometimes the white light would fade out and come back. The most interesting time I was there was I'd actually seen, there's actually two small lights you can sometimes see. There's a little red light and a little blue light. And I remember watching them one night and you could actually see, I'm trying to remember if it was the red or the blue one, but you could actually see it almost like swinging across the road. It's hard to explain, but the light is kind of at the end of what is a little bit like a country lane, like a country road. It's sort of like I think a field access road of some sort. At one time a train track did run across there. So yeah, it was just, but anyway, sort of down at the end of this road, like you could actually see where the tree line was. If you're there and it was a bright enough night, you could see where the trees sort of sat. And in between those two lines of trees, once in a while, you can see this light sort of swinging from one side of the brush into the other side of the brush, which is, I've only ever seen that one time, but it was really fascinating. So, I don't know. I've sort of one of those things. I know that there was, I think, a university class, I think, or some students had tried to debunk the light at one time. I remember that, and I remember reading about it, and they were sort of suggesting the white light could be headlights in the highway. The red lights, people have described could be taillights. Nobody's ever described that blue light to me. I've seen, and plus, I mean, the activity I've seen out there has been, like I said, it means because it does something different all the time. I'm not convinced by that explanation personally. But it's interesting. I don't know what it is. I'm not going to sort of sit here and say, it's for sure a ghost. Maybe there's some sort of, I don't know, maybe it's some trick of physics that we don't know about, but whatever it is, I just find it interesting. So yeah, I would sort of pop by there every so often just to see what it was up to. I don't tend to get scared very easily, so I didn't mind going there by myself at night. So
I was gonna say, if the right to write the books you do, you must not.
Yeah, it does not much scares me. And I think partially because I'm a crime reporter, I've already seen some of the scariest signs of things. So I don't tend to get scared by the idea of ghosts very much. So I would just kind of see, it was just a matter of curiosity for me. But I just thought when the opportunity came up to write about, I was kind of thinking of story ideas for the series. The first one in this particular series that kind of came to mind was like, what I haven't written about yet is the St. Louis Light. And so I kind of used this as it was a take on that, really. It's a very fictionalized take, obviously, but it was a way for me to kind of play with that Saskatchewan legend, really. So
You and I are very different in that way, because the one and only time that I was dragged to go see the lights by St. Louis and PA, because there's also supposed to be a place where if the car fogs up, the handprints cover the inside of the car.
Yeah.
And as the car started fogging up, no, I'm out. They went to get out of the car to see the lights, and I sat there like head in my coat and was just like, this isn't happening. This is not happening. This is so not happening for me.
Well,
so
I have to tell you about one experience I had there, because I two coworkers I had at the Daily Herald, two fellows, they wanted to go see this light, and I was it's really hard to find unless you know where it is. So like I'll take you guys out and we'll go and look at it one night. So so we went out. There was nobody else there, just like the three of us. Those guys are so cute. So there was just the three of us there. It was midweek, so that kind of helps. Weekends used to be very busy. But anyway, so there is a story about it that that it responds to French. So if you would speak to it in French, it'll sometimes respond. I'd heard this. I hadn't really tried it because I don't speak a lot of French. But anyway, so one of my friends decided, because it wasn't doing a whole lot. We were just sort of watching it. It was just kind of the white light was sort of doing its sort of fading in and out thing, and it wasn't doing a whole lot. It was one of those really bright nights where you could see where the horizon was. So you could see the light, on the horizon, kind of coming in and going out from that spot on the horizon. So anyway, so not much is going on. So I just said, well, okay, well, that's good. Let's go back. It's getting late. And so one of my coworkers decided, in his infinite wisdom, to start yelling at it in French. Venez ici, come here, right? So he's like yelling, venez ici, and I was like, oh, come on, stop it. He's like, so because I do try to be respectful. I mean, if this is an actual person, I'd like to be respectful, right? Anyway, so okay. So we started going back to my car, and I turn around, and the light is now below the horizon, and it's huge. So I don't know what's going on here at this point. That point I did get scared, because I thought this thing is responding to this command to come here. I mean, it's clearly not where I've usually seen it. It's big, and it's below the horizon as if it's coming toward us. So at that point I was like, okay, I don't want to see this any closer. So yeah, I did hit my limit that time.
So let's go back.
Yeah.
Back. How did you fall into crime reporting? Because no one comes out of university and says, I want to write about bad things every day.
Oddly enough, I did.
Really?
Yeah, not that specific thing. I didn't say I want to write about bad things. But I think when I came out of university, I was actually already quite fascinated with crime, I think. So I really just lucked out into it. It just so happened when I started in Prince Albert, I just had finished J school. And so the Prince Albert job had opened up. So I started there, and I lucked into that job first off, just right out of J school. And then I lucked into the fact that the person who had been covering courts had just gone to the Star Phoenix. So her job was open. Nobody really wanted it, because it's one of those jobs I think not a lot of people in my experience really want to cover court, because it's
very procedural.
Very procedural. Yeah. And I mean, there's lots of stuff that to get wrong. And believe me, I got a lot wrong during my first year. But so anyway, yeah, it was one of those things. I really wanted to do it. I just found it was interesting. I find it's such an interesting place to study people. Like I feel like, the story of humanity is rarely told better than in a courtroom. Like you see all sides of people there. Like you see the worst of people, you see the best of people. You see, I mean, what a great place to learn about, the reasons behind crime, right? I mean, because it's just so, I don't know. I think I went in with a lot of misconceptions. I absolutely went in with a lot of misconceptions about crime and, criminals and, what goes into it, what creates them, who they are. So yeah, I just sort of found it really fascinating. And I just, like I said, I just lucked into it and I was kind of never wanted to do anything else after that. So that's really, that's ended up being where I sat for, I sat in courtrooms basically after that for about 20 years, essentially. So yeah, it was great.
Can I have a puppy, please?
I know.
Yeah,
We
give me
almost-
one of the instigators.
I'll have to,
So that people know what is going on.
hello.
There we go.
Look how sweet you are.
You're fine.
Oh,
Okay, so when did you write your first fiction book?
are we going back in time?
Yes, we're going back in time.
Way back in time. I started writing fiction probably when I was joking, like basically from the time I could spell. So as soon as I could write anything, I was writing books. So I was probably about 7. So,
And what were you writing at 7?
like just fun, just animal stories, I had my stuffed animals, so I'd be writing about them, like creating all these little adventures with them, just goofy stuff, right? I
Yeah.
mean, stuff you write about. And then, I started, sometimes you write about characters from movies you like and TV shows you like. So I do that. By the time I think I started writing crime fiction when I was in my late teens. So I started doing that at that point. So that's why I have a hard time remembering exactly where my interest in crime started, but
You are, they're not gonna be able to hear her online.
That's so, you're so sweet. Oh.
Are we driving?
Oh, do we want a treat? There you go. There you go.
You like me now?
Oh.
You like me now? So when
There
you
you
were
go.
writing those
Yeah.
teen true like crime stories,
Yeah.
what were you getting wrong that you're like, oh God, I would never publish these now?
Oh my Lord. Well, first of all, the writing was terrible. So let's just face it, very few people can write really well when they're 17 years old, right? So I look back and I mean, the writing is bad. The procedure was obviously, writing, at that time I was writing about a trio of sort of amateur sleuths who were kind of in university, and clearly they are not going to get insight into police investigations, which, you kind of start thinking would be kind of, that age and you've read a lot of Hardy Boys and Nancy Drew, you always think that, you think that people are going to have access. They just don't. It doesn't work that way. So there's that. And then I don't know. I think just obviously my knowledge of what people who committed crimes were like, I think was very stereotypical and what you're going to see on some really cheesy television shows, right? So there's that. I mean, the characterization's off, procedure is off.
Your turn.
I mean, over here. Hey. So yeah, so everything is just a little bit off, right?
Yeah.
So yeah.
So the first one you published,
yes. So the first
was that at the Leader Post when you were still at Leader Post?
Yeah. So I was still there. Let me rest. So yeah, I was still there. It was in 2018. What are you doing? So 2018 was when I put the first one out. So yeah, I hadn't really, honestly, I'd never thought about publishing anything because I just found it, I just did it for fun. Oops, are you going down? And he's off. So yeah, I just did it for fun. I'd never really planned to publish anything. It was just something that I just did. And I'd been, I don't know if you know Andy Cooper.
Mhm.
Yeah, Andy. So one of my colleagues, he and I used to chat writing all the time because he likes to write as well. And so we used to have a lot of desk side chats about writing, sort of what I was working on and what he was working on and all of that. And I mean, it never occurred to me to publish because, I never tried approaching a publishing company or any of that. And he sort of was saying, well, why don't you try self-publishing? Just you could give it a go. So he kind of over time, I hadn't, even then I was a bit reluctant. He kind of talked me around to the idea of self-publishing and, potentially doing it myself, and said he sort of pointed me towards some really great resources. And for the first time in my life, I actually started to think, maybe I could publish something, right? I mean, So, yeah, it was an interesting kind of thing. And I mean, actually, the more I looked, a few times in my life, I had entertained the thought of, well, what if I did send something away to a publishing company? Once I started exploring the world of self-publishing, and I realized I can actually keep all of the all of my royalties instead of handing it to a publishing company, I thought, yeah, actually, this is perfect. So I actually went, and I mean, I'm a bit of a control freak, honestly, too. So that was a big thing. I was like, okay, I get to have full creative control of my own stuff. My timeline's my own. When I finish, get my stuff edited, I can just publish it. So yeah, and plus, I mean, I'm kind of business minded anyway. I kind of like the idea of us sort of doing all of the advertising, the marketing, and I kind of found that fascinating, just how to go about the business side as well as the creative side. So for me, it was kind of a perfect fit to be able to do it myself. So yeah, so 2018 came around, and at that point, I kind of, there's kind of a whole other story about establishing, the books and the characters and all of that. But by 2018, I kind of hit the point where, okay, I've finally got something that I'm kind of ready to start pushing out there. So,
And which book
yeah.
was the first book?
So the first one is Black Candle, which is in the first, this is actually the follow-up series to the original one, but Black Candle is the first one in the 7-book Sullivan Gray series. So that was completed a little bit ago. So this series I'm still working on, which is why I thought, okay, I'll give you guys this, because at least it's an ongoing thing, and that. But yeah, the series that started it was the Sullivan Gray series. So 7 books, and Black Candle was the first one. So yeah.
Where did Sully and Des come from? Are they based on anyone you know?
No, it's a bit of a roundabout thing, because I never set out to write paranormal fiction. It was never something I mean, I find ghosts fascinating, as we've established. But I'd always just written straight crime fiction. I was writing, actually, at the time when Andy and I were chatting, I was writing this police procedure set in Regina. So I had like a whole bunch of books started, I had a couple finished, I had all this going. But I sort of put my marketing hat on at that point. And when I started looking at the resources that, Andy kind of pointed me toward, and some of this course I was taking on, that one of their resources kind of pointed me toward, is I kind of realized there was this, basically crime fiction is this massive kind of, it's a sort of a massive genre, right? I mean, it's a huge sea of books. So trying to get your books noticed inside that genre is really tricky. So I was looking for a niche that was still within crime fiction, but was kind of underserved. So actually at that point, putting my marketing hat on, I kind of had noticed ghost suspense was actually a really hot niche, with very few books and lots of readers. So I thought, you know what, if I throw some ghosts into my crime fiction, maybe, I can actually turn this into something, right? So I kind of sat down and I started to think about characters, and the first, like, Sully is kind of the first one that popped into my head, and I had this sort of idea for this character who basically his whole thing is the only ghosts that he can see are homicide victims.
Right.
So that kind of gave me somewhere to start, because it's like anything he sees is obviously now an unsolved homicide. So it's sort of a nice starting point for any, series. And then, it was just a matter of finding a secondary character. And so I struggled with that a bit, and I finally sort of came up with the Des thing. So it was just, there's a lot of that sort of, I like the dynamic of the brother relationship. And, I know I love the show Supernatural, for instance, and, a few other, I loved the Hardy Boys as a kid, and I, I at least like Simon and Simon. I mean, all that stuff. I love that whole little brother relationship, and I thought it'd be fun to write.
Right.
So I threw him in there too, and I made him a cop as well. It just helps to, at the time when the series started, he was a cop. So it just helped having somebody who at least had some knowledge of crime scene kind of investigation on board of that. So yeah.
So when did this go from like a hobby / side hustle to your full-time job?
Let's see. It was kind of a very gradual thing. Like, I basically it's a bit of a process, kind of, because there's this whole process to kind of getting to that point when you're self-publishing. Self-publishing is basically, I sort of had to kind of take a variety of steps to get there. But it's essentially, it's like anything, the more books you write, And as long as you can market them well and you can find your audience, the more you write, the more you make, right? So it's just sort of a matter of how many, getting to a certain number of books and maintaining an audience that allowed me to kind of get to the point where I was able to replace my income. So I guess that let me think. I think happened in, I think I was at that, financial point anyway, sometime in, I think, 2021. Maybe late 2020. I'm trying to think. I know that the pandemic was kind of the thing that pushed things over the edge. It was like people were stuck at home. They were looking for stuff to do. And I think a lot of people were reading more than they ever had. I mean, I sort of noticed just with my books that, obviously, as a reader too, I was reading more than I had been. And I was writing a lot more than I had been. Just, again, you're stuck at home. What do you do, right? And being a writer. So I do think that the pandemic really did, especially those months where people were really told to be staying at home and all of that. It did create a lot of, and maybe a few more readers than there had been. And people were reading, I think, a lot more than they had been. So people were churning through books a lot more quickly than they maybe had been. So yeah, I think that really helped to sort of push things over the edge too for me. It was just, I found a lot of new readers, and the readers I did have kind of read through my stuff quite quickly. So I was kind of, and I write fairly quickly. So I put out 4 years, so roughly. So it allows me to kind of build that, maintain that audience, I guess. So yeah.
I know people have some questions about self-publishing and how
Right,
that works.
yeah.
I have learned through getting to know other authors that there's a community that they all kind of live in and support each other.
Mhm.
Does self-publishing have the same kind of community?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Like I'm in a couple of, I'm in a number of Facebook groups actually. So that's kind of the big thing. Like for me, a lot of it's online. Like I know a few, well, Joanne Paulson, I've gotten to know quite well. So she's also, most of her stuff is self-published. So she and I have been in contact quite a bit over the past few years about, what's working for us, what's not working for us. And she's obviously also writes crime fiction with her series. So we had that in common, which was great. So there's that more personal connection there. But I'm also on a number of Facebook groups that have been absolutely really fantastic. They're very sort of supportive little groups. There's one of the big resources I used was it was called the Self-Publishing Formula. At that time, they've kind of changed branding a little bit. But Mark Dawson is the one who started that process. He's a really successful thriller author. So he's basically kind of gone and created a course and a community of self-published authors who sort of support each other. And plus he's also, trains you in how to actually do it. So So I just actually totally thank him for that, because that was really what gave me the know-how to kind of turn this vision into reality. So yeah, so everything associated with that community. And then there's like the 20 books to 50K group as well on Facebook, which is massive. So yeah, so basically between those two, and then I'm in a few other little smaller groups that are kind of offshoots. And I'm also I'm right now as well in a ghost fiction authors group, which is just a closed group, and there's 13 of us, and we just promote each other's stuff every month. So that helps as well. So we each kind of, through our newsletters, we just, each month we'll take turns promoting one of the others in the group. So yeah, so that works really well. So I'm in a few groups like that. So it's a really nice community. And what I really love about those groups is like when I was kind of getting started and trying to get the things right, like covers, or I'm trying to figure out, okay, needed to find an editor. So, all of that. People were really great at dealing with those things. But they're also, what I love about them is they're also brutally honest with you. It's like, so if you put out, if you give them a blurb or you give them a cover and it's not good, they will tell you it's not good, and they will tell you why it's not good.
Yeah.
And it does help you to go away then and put together something better, which I love. I love, it's very constructive criticism within those groups too. So we do, I think everybody in those groups does really work well to make each other better at what we do. And they're also really supportive. There's people in those groups that are making like nothing, and there's people in those groups who are making millions of dollars every year. So it's like, and I find for the most part, everybody is really cohesive and really supportive and congratulatory when there are members who are like making a killing at it. So it doesn't seem to be like a crazy amount of kind of backstabbiness that you'll find in some fields. So I really love that about it too. So yeah.
So that leads me to a question about finances, and share what you're comfortable with. But
Yeah.
how do you make money? Like,
Yeah.
how does that work through self-publishing? Because you're not standing at a table
Right.
selling hard copy books like you
Yeah.
would have in the past, where
Right,
you'd have to
yeah.
have them physically printed yourself.
Yeah. So with my books, I chose to, when I started, just given the genre it's in, there was I find the markets that I'm kind of geared toward, like basically my readers, a lot of them are in Kindle Unlimited. So that program, so I chose early on to put my books into Kindle Unlimited, which means the ebooks are exclusive to Amazon. So I can't market the ebooks outside of Amazon. Paperbacks are fair game. They can go anywhere, but I just have them on Amazon as well. Like, honestly, the paperbacks don't do that much for me. Most of the vast majority of what I sell are ebooks. And of that, the vast majority is actually, they're picked up through Kindle Unlimited. So I think my income is generally about, I haven't checked recently, but I think it's usually in the 60 to 70% of what I make is through Kindle Unlimited.
Really?
So that's just page reads. So you're paid per page read.
So if someone doesn't finish your book, you don't get paid for the whole thing.
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh.
So you just get paid per page read. So basically somebody borrows the book through that program as they read it. And I mean, honestly, and Amazon's really good at seeing if somebody's skimming, some people were trying to hack the system. Because I think there were some people who were trying to game the system by having people just do that. But no, they seem to know, I think, when people are reading your book, actually reading it. So yeah, the most of what I get paid is through that program. So that's basically how it works. So it's like through royalties, through like your ebooks. So yeah, so it's page reads for Kindle Unlimited. If you sell an ebook, the actual, as a sale of the actual unit, you get 70% royalty. If it's things $2.99 to $3.99 in that, or sorry, $2.99 to $9.99 in that range US, you get 70%. And then for paperbacks, you get 60% less, printing costs and all that sort of thing, which unfortunately have increased thanks to everything.
Yeah.
So basically that means, every time I sell an ebook, it's 70% in my pocket, which is
right.
Adds up, in a hurry if you manage to sell enough, right? So that helps.
So how did you find your audience?
So I started off, actually, when I first started, with like Black Candle, I actually used, sort of newsletter swaps. So I was trying to build a newsletter like you try to sort of, first steps to start a newsletter, you're trying to get a following on there. So it's just sort of a built-in audience, really, like people you can market to later. But so I used Black Candle as a giveaway at that time. It was before it went up on Amazon. So I just did a bunch of different swaps, just to build my newsletter up at that point. And once I kind of had enough people and I had my second book ready, then I took it off of those swaps, and then I published it to Amazon. And I think that's how it it's taking back a while. Anyway, at that point I did definitely put it into Kindle Unlimited and started the next one. So I think I waited, so I kept sort of working on the newsletter and things like that, but it wasn't really till I started advertising. So I run ads at this. I've tried a few different advertising strategies. I tried Amazon ads and I've tried Facebook ads. The one that I've stuck with has been Facebook.
Really?
Yeah. So that's been the best for me. Like I've found and I think the reason is my audience is there. Like I think most of the people that I find who read my books, at least the ones who interact with me, and I generally have a few interactions every day, which is wonderful. So most of the people who read my books, I find are women, I would say 40 and up. And like I mean, speaking as a woman who's 40 and up, like myself and a lot of people in my friendship group are on Facebook still. So obviously that's a good place to find.
It's our social media platform of choice.
I've tried a few other ones, but I seem to stay on Facebook because everybody I know is on Facebook. So it works. And I mean, it seems like the people who are mostly reading my books are there too. So it works well in terms of advertising. I'm able to advertise to people there and find readers. I also use like various promotions. So there's, you can kind of offer your book for either for free or discount it and then take part in these promotions. So I did a few of those and I was lucky enough to get a couple. I don't know if anyone uses BookBub at all.
Yeah.
But anyway, BookBub is like the gold standard. If you're a publisher, author publisher, if you can get a BookBub feature deal, you have it made. So I managed to snag myself 2 of those, and those really took things like to the
Really?
next level. Yeah, so like you kind of the trick is offering, like I offered the first 4 books as a box set. I think I can't remember if I offered it for free or 99 cents, but whatever it was, I sold, it's either sold or gave away like a huge number of those. But then, people go on to read, hopefully you get enough people reading then the rest of your series and you make a lot of money that way. Plus it helps to push your book up in the ranks on Amazon, which then gives you more people who see your book, who then buy your book. And so it's sort of a nice cycle, so
this is not something you could do if you didn't want to do the work.
No, it's
You
a
would
lot
not
of
do,
work.
you would not do well at self-publishing if you didn't
No.
want to do the work.
I don't think so, unless you got really lucky. There are those unicorns, as they're called in the industry, like people who just sort of are sort of mad, find that little magic key somewhere that they're able to pull it off. It happens. There are people who do really, really well and just luck into stuff, and it happens. But for most of us, yeah, it is a lot of work. I mean, there's the whole business side to things. I mean, there's the writing side, but the business side does take up a lot of time. Like there's and I'm not naturally a social media lover. So it is a lot of work. I do a lot of social media in terms of, posting to my Facebook page, Instagram. I tried a few other things, but I tried YouTube, tried TikTok, I tried all that. It just didn't work for me. And I think because my audience just isn't there. But I've tried a lot of different strategies, just so I've played with a lot of things, tried different things. And I mean, there's obviously the money you have to invest into it too. Like I do invest in Facebook ads a fair amount every month. But I get that back like kind of three times over, so it works out well. But yeah, there's definitely the money involved and there's the time involved and the stress involved, because frankly, like every month I have to think about the fact, okay, I'm starting at 0 again. So
Right.
So it's stressful. I don't have a monthly paycheck. So every month I'm just kind of sitting there, okay, is that going to come in? Is this going to be the month the bubble bursts and I don't make what I need to make but so far so good, knock on wood. So yeah, so the money side can be stressful because you're just relying on yourself and your product and your the grace of the Facebook and Amazon gods that things are going to that the algorithm's not going to suddenly completely change and I'm going to have to figure out a new strategy.
But you're doing it.
I'm doing it. So far so good. So yeah.
Okay, let's talk about your writing. Are you a plotter or a fly by the seat of your pants kind of writer?
I am totally.
I asked the control freak, are you a plotter?
I wish I was a plotter.
You're not a plotter?
I wish I was. And I know I should be, considering I'm a bit of a control freak from the business perspective, but I find the creative process too hard to do for myself. I've tried plotting. I honestly, I've tried plotting several times. Like I use Scrivener and it gives me this, you get all those nice little I don't know if anyone uses it, but I've got all this, it comes with these little scene cards for every chapter that you start. So every file is a little scene card. So I've tried being really diligent and filling those in with like, okay, this could happen in this chapter and this could happen here. And somewhere along the way, my characters kind of become real people and they decide to go and do things on their own. And, you just feel like you're following along with what they're doing. So I don't know. I find the few times I've tried plotting, except once I successfully plotted, I was very proud of myself because I did stick to the plot, which was wonderful. And it actually, have to say, it made for a less stressful process,
right?
In terms of writing. I wish I could do that all the time, but my brain just doesn't work that way. I just find it's too restrictive. Yeah. Like I feel like I like to be surprised too. It's like when people are reading, I find when I'm reading a mystery, any kind of mystery, crime fiction, thriller, whatever. I love the twists and the turns, and I love to be surprised by the characters and the plot, and to find some really exciting twist toward the end or something. And that's the fun of writing too. Like for me, like that's the best part of writing, is when I'm sort of have an idea of, okay, like I think throughout the book, this is the killer. And then you get to a point in the book and you realize, wait a minute, that's not the killer, it's somebody else. And I get excited by that too when I'm writing. And I feel like sometimes when I plot anyway, I lose that too much. And I kind of, it takes some of the fun out of it for me.
Mhm.
So yeah, I feel like I'm somebody who wishes she was a plotter, but I'm just at the end of the day.
Do you know where you're going to end?
Well, roughly, I have a rough idea. I always have a rough idea of where a book is going to go. Like I always kind of have a basic idea of, okay, this is going to be the general idea about this book, because it's kind of where I'd like, I know where I want the characters to end up, psychologically or physically or whatever. I know where I want them to be. But in terms of say, like I said, I don't always know who the bad guy is. So that sometimes changes for me. So I guess I can say I sort of know where the book is going, but I don't always. So that's a bit tricky.
What are you working on now?
So I'm working on, I had a secondary character that came out through the series named Ray Mallory. So I had a first I had a fair amount of interest in her from readers. They were kind of interested in know more about her, and thought she would make a good character for her own series. And I thought, well, that would be fun. So I did write one of her already. So I've got one out called Hell's Gate, featuring that character.
I saw you were holding that one.
Oh, right. Okay, yeah. So I'm working on her second book now. So I've been writing that one. And what I'm sort of having a bit of fun, because she's a little more international. So I kind of feel like she's lived and worked in England before. So I kind of got to take her to England for that book, for Hell's Gate. And so I kind of want to take her back to, another sort of English setting for the second book. So I had a chance to go over there recently. So it was one of the things, is going over there and turning it into a bit of a research project where I could go and explore some spots where I thought it'd be fun to take her. And, so yeah, that's what I've been working on. I did a little bit of traveling, like research related stuff. And right now I'm in the process of writing it. So I think I'm about a third written now. So I've got to cram that one in the next couple months and get that one squared away. And then,
because your boss is really hard on you.
Exactly. She has to be, I know. Oh,
have you ever included details or storyline from things that you've reported on in your fiction writing?
Not really. I think because I'm always so nervous about doing that. I feel like I know some authors do such a great job of that. Like Joanne Paulson's a good example. She includes stuff from the news. She carries that over into some of her plots, and she does such a fantastic job of it. I feel really, really scared about it, because I think because I especially with crime, I feel like it's such a personal thing for people, and it's really the worst time of their lives. And I never wanted it to be, I don't want somebody to look at something I wrote and say, you've turned my story into entertainment. And I think I'm always scared about that. What I do though, is I will take emotions and people's, the emotion that I've seen in court. I've been able to carry that over. I mean, things that people have said, things that people have expressed in terms of how they feel. I've been able to explore that more. And I feel like, I know for me, like that was the thing that bothered me the most about crime reporting, is that as a human being with a heart, I had a really hard time sometimes distancing myself from those things. Like those would be the things that I would carry. Like I could deal with a fair amount of the gruesome stuff, like without not bothering me too much, but the emotion just, that kills you sometimes. Like that's just hard to witness. And I did find that, when I was writing books, that I would kind of work it in. It's almost, in a sense, it's kind of a little bit cathartic. Like it's something that I was using, I think, and I didn't think about it at the time, but looking back and now I can sort of see it from another perspective. I think it was a way for me to deal with those things myself. And kind of put it somewhere that was a little more safe.
Mhm.
So it's the nice thing is when you give your feelings, or you give, you know, some of the things that you were seeing to somebody else, to a character, it lets you explore it without kind of exposing, I guess, your soul quite as much as you
Mhm.
might otherwise, right?
Mhm.
So there was a certain safety in that, and it was also just, it was just a nice way to be able to deal with it. And plus, honestly, I like the fact that I feel like I can write more fulsome characters than certainly than I used to, and more fulsome and more full characters than what I often will see in like television, some of the shows that I've seen on TV or in the movies. And you know, so it's been, yeah, so that part I do use. But in terms of the plots and, you know, the things that I've seen, I try to stay away from the things that I've, like the cases I've covered. So
Okay,
yeah,
but being a crime reporter, it means you had relationships with police officers,
right.
professional relationships with police
Right.
officers, I should clarify. Um, do you have feedback on what they think of how you portray police work in your books? Have you had any
Yeah.
feedback?
I've been really lucky because I've been able to, you know, I do know a lot of police officers, so I actually, to be honest, I've got several of them I text. If I'm at a point where, okay, I gotta know what this type of officer would do in this case, like what would a major crimes officer do now, or what would an IDAN officer do now, or a canine or whatever. I actually have people in those various areas who have worked in those areas who I can text and say, am I getting this right? You know, like what would be this, like what would be involved in this? So far I've heard nothing bad. Knock on wood.
Good.
So yeah, it helps when you've got people though you can reach out to and make sure you're getting those details more or less right. I'm not saying everything I've written is accurate, or you know, I'm sure there's stuff in there that somebody would go, oh, I would never do it that way, but for the most part, I think it's been okay. So far so good anyway. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Heather and I used to work together at the Leader Post, and I could
Yes.
ask her questions all night. Some of these things I already know the answers to. But do you guys have questions for Heather?
Yeah.
Okay, so when I was going through the back years up, I saw that your editor's last name was Sullivan.
Yeah.
So just out of curiosity, how did you come up with the names for your characters? Are they like an homage to somebody in your life, or
No, you know,
just like the way it sounded?
yeah, you know, it was kind of weird. I actually totally fluked into Hannah as an editor. Like I actually had already created the characters and I was looking for an editor, and just so happened that somebody on one of my groups had recommended Hannah as an editor. And I hadn't even really even occurred to me at first when I brought her on board. Oh wait, her last name matches. But yeah, it just sort of, I lucked into it. The names themselves, I think, trying to think how I came up with them. I think I liked the name Sully. I just sort of I had that name in my head and I really liked it. So I was trying to find, and I found the name, and I liked Gray. I found Gray kind of, it's kind of got that element of, you know, you could kind of see, you know, there's that kind of gray world, you know, where he kind of moves within. So I kind of like that. And plus he's, you know, I mean, in the Sullivan Gray series, that's 7 books, it's sort of, a lot of it centers on his background and where he comes from, and, you know, this sort of shady side of him that he's trying to explore and figure out. And so I think I sort of like that as a last name for him. So, and just the name Sullivan Gray just kind of rolled off the tongue for me. So that's where that came from. And then I always do like Google searches and all that to make sure there's not like some famous person with that name as well. And then, yeah, Des Braddock was, I think, again, it was just sort of a name I liked. It just sort of seemed to go, but I don't know anybody with those names. And in fact, I try very hard to, except I do give a lot of characters first names of people I know. So I've got a lot of secondary characters, like guest stars or whatever you want to call them, for various books that I've named after family members or friends, or, you know, okay, some of my readers or whatever. So, yeah, so I'll do that occasionally with first names, but I try really hard not to have names that are like somebody specific, because I always a bit worry about that a little bit. But yeah.
Part 2.
Yeah.
So when I read your like your little bio, I was like, oh, interesting. Is it that she or he? And I was just like, I
Yeah.
couldn't tell.
I know. Yeah.
I was not too sure until I saw the Facebook post and I saw that you had sent it
Yeah.
on it. And I'm like, oh, I bet that's her.
Yeah. You know, yeah. Well, see, when I first started, when I first started writing the books, I was kind of not sure. I wanted people to know it was me. And I guess that was the thing. Like when I first started, I was I was a little embarrassed about it, quite frankly, because I thought, okay, what
Why?
if this totally sucks? Like, what if I'm horrible at this? And like I was still working in
Your
the
ego
paper.
is a jerk.
So, I don't know. I just had I just had I was sort of so scared about that because I thought I'm working at the paper still. So it's one of the reasons I went with the pen name, because it was like I was working at the paper. I wanted there to be like I didn't want people to confuse the two. I wanted to keep that division between my professional like paper life and my, my fictional kind of creative life. So I wanted a pen name for that. And then I just thought, I kind of just to give it that extra bit of distance, I guess I just thought, well, maybe, I'll just leave it so that I'm not necessarily, I don't need to sort of have, make it very clear what my gender is. I thought, well, maybe there's some readers who will be put off that I'm a girl, that I'm writing. Because I thought, well, maybe I'd appeal to some guys who might not read it if they knew it was by a girl or whatever. You hear that. It's sort of like, the reason J.K. Rowling kind of went with those initials and didn't initially kind of come out as sort of saying, the female, because I think she was kind of told at the start that, boys wouldn't necessarily read books by, a female fantasy writer. I think obviously that's not true, but I think that's what she was told. And I just thought, well, okay, I'll just do that. So I did keep it very general when I first started. Now I have no problem with it, but it was like at the time I was just so antsy about everything. So
Do people expect you to be a man?
I have honestly, I do still have a few people, despite the fact that my face is on my Amazon profile now. So I don't think it's very, it's no secret, but I still have a few people who aren't sure. And I've seen a few reviews I can't wait for his next book. And, so,
Well, The Woman in the
So, yeah.
Window was written by a man.
right.
And I remember we all thought it was a woman.
Yeah, initials, right?
So
So that's the thing. So who knows? I mean, so whatever. I mean, it is what it is. So it doesn't bother me.
where does the
one way or
Bane
other.
come from?
It's my RM. It's the RM where I was from. Yeah. So I thought it was it's my initial with HP and then Bayne, which is the RM where I was from. And I thought it sounded like a cool name for like a mystery.
I was like, is it
author,
because this is the bane of your existence and you just changed the spelling?
I know. I was thinking something it would be kind of cool. It's like Wolfbane or something. So
Yeah.
I thought, not that I'm writing about wolves, but
Yet.
Yet. Right. So yeah, anyway, so I just thought, oh, it's another little connection to something that means something to me. So yeah, so it worked kind of nicely.
Other questions?
And kind of like a weird one.
No.
Maybe I'm just finding my own self-confidence made for that book. Because there was a couple points where you're describing a couple of female characters and you're describing them crevices and blah, blah, blah. And then you're like, early to mid 40s. I'm like, oh, no. So I was like, well, and then you also said once I was like 42-year-old. It looks not the decade off her life, and then they look human. I'm like, we're not human.
I don't even remember. It's terrible. I don't even remember how I worded it, but I mean, yeah, I think sometimes because I'm old, I think when I hit 40, I started to honestly, my body started to fall apart at 40, I have to say.
Yeah.
So it's like I sometimes feel older than I am. So I mean, I think sometimes that bleeds into my writing, sadly, which I think, and my editor's the same vintage as I am, so sometimes she'll catch stuff like that too. So yeah, it's one of those things. I think sometimes, as a writer, I think sometimes your own experience does bleed into your writing without you sometimes intending it to.
You're seeing
So-
so
Yeah. no,
Mine is
thank
when
you.
I'm tired though, let me tell you,
I have to
Candace.
say, yeah. There. I yeah, I know. I think sometimes I've sort of noticed crevices there that I wish weren't there. So I think sometimes my own observations of myself, can influence the way I describe people, not intentionally. It's just like sometimes it's the way I see myself, and maybe it's sometimes a lesson for me to maybe be kinder to myself and more patient with myself, because I have honestly, I've become more frustrated with myself in the recent years because I've had to give up, like, just, I mean, Sam can understand this because you've sort of suffered like some injuries too. And like I've had to give up all the exercise I love doing because my body does not let me do them anymore. So I've sort of just had to gradually learn to accept I'm not a young person in the sense of being able to do those activities that I did when I was a young person, right? When I was in my 20s and 30s, and I could do all that stuff. I can't do those anymore. And it's hard. I had to, yeah. And I know, and I think for a while, honestly, I'm so frustrated with myself, and it does bleed through. And so, yeah. So yeah, I've come to a better point now. I'm definitely more accepting, and I'm more appreciative of myself and my abilities, and the fact that I still can do a lot of things. It's just have to not, like I say, it's unfortunate that it sometimes does bleed into the writing, and yeah.
Yeah, deeply crevice and then the scent.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, I think I've become a little better at that now, because I've got some characters who are left wing, or I do have some characters who are like a lot stronger, and are older as well. So yeah, so it's one of those things. So yeah, I know I have to sometimes take a lesson from myself on those things too. So
I mean, it's just because like I started older with the age and stuff, and I feel like probably younger and better than I have, even though my body's.
yeah,
I feel like internally,
Yeah.
like it's just starting again.
Yeah.
So that's what I can.
I know, it's kind of the thing, right? It's sort of it's true. I think I haven't quite hit that point yet, but I'm definitely better psychologically with the aging process than I was. So yeah, I've come to a better spot in myself where I'm not nearly as angry at myself for not being able to do all the same things that I could do before. So yeah.
Any other questions? Yes.
Do you get a breakdown of where your sales are globally from Amazon?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
I was wondering
Yeah.
because the mention in this novel of the residential school
right.
resonates with us Canadians in
Yeah.
Saskatchewan, especially.
Yeah.
Our great big neighbors to the south.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
The question was
Yeah.
about, for people
Oh.
online, was about the breakdown of where her books are purchased from. Just in case they can't hear you.
Mhm.
The microphone's here.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, like I honestly, I don't worry too much, honestly, about where the sales are coming from. Like the vast majority of my sales are in the US. I'd say, what am I probably about, I'd say close to probably 70%-ish. I have
Really?
to look again.
And
I'd
where in the
be-
south? Does it tell you?
It doesn't say specifically, no, it
Oh.
just gives you the country. I do know a little bit about where they are based on who writes to me. Like I know where some of the readers are located, and they're all over the US, right? I've got people in California and Texas and Georgia and Louisiana, like in New York. So I've got people all over the place. And then I think roughly another 20% are in the UK. So I have very few readers, honestly, in Canada. Largely that's because of advertising. I actually have tried advertising in Canada and Australia, but the markets are just so small. Like I just don't have, there aren't enough, just so at Facebook advertising is like, there just aren't enough people to advertise to. So for me to advertise, that's like, I spend more than I make, sort of just the way it works out. So, but I'm kind of unapologetically Canadian when it comes to the way I write. So I use Canadian spellings. I use Canadian grammar and phrases and things like that. And I actually have, without really intending it necessarily some of the time, I do have readers who sort of say, you must be Canadian because you say it this way. So people kind of notice that. So I do sort of try to reference as much as I can things that are important here. So I do feel it's good to sort of, I do want my stuff sort of set in some sort of a world, right? I still, even though I want everybody to be able to relate to it worldwide, I also want it to be sort of reflective of where I come from, you know, so the world that I'm in and the things that are important to me and important to where I come from. I want to sort of give that a voice somewhere. So yeah, I do make some references. I always figure if people aren't sure about them, I'm happy for them to write to me, or frankly, I'd rather they just go and look it up and find out more about them, right? I mean, if it's something they have questions about. So yeah, I mean, I've been lucky enough to have, actually, I do have a couple of people, like, you know, in the US who are, you know, what they term Native American down there, who have written and been, you know, quite thankfully appreciative of the, you know, the fact that I'm, you know, I don't just have everybody who's kind of the same experience in my book. I don't want to sort of write something that's just, you know, I find that boring when I'm reading a book that everybody's the same, and I want to sort of include as much as I can of you know, people who are coming from different backgrounds and different experiences in life. So yeah, I do try to make some references definitely to kind of set it in that world, I guess. Yeah. Thanks.
Any other questions? Any questions online? No?
I don't know.
Okay, yeah, go ahead. Sure.
Like, what's your most best-selling book, would you say?
Probably.
Question was, what's the best-selling
Yeah.
book?
Well, trying to think, I'm really lazy about going on and breaking down where things sort of sit on. I do know like Black Candle, because just the way I advertise Black Candle has sold a fair bit. The first box set from that series has sold a fair bit. Like the first in series is always going to sell a bit more. The Ray Mallory one did really well. I think it was kind of, you know, it's a female, people love the, you know, the female sort of
Badass.
right? We all do. Yeah, so that one did quite well. So I'm hoping to kind of continue with book 2. So yeah, so I don't know. I first in series always seem to do well. I know Edge Creek Light actually does quite well as well. So yeah, the trick is always to hopefully get people to sort of read on after that first book, and you know, I seem to do okay that way. So it's all right. But yeah.
How long do you think it takes you to write like one book?
I always have to sort of set it within, because when I have sort of a set time period with my editors, so I have to have one written every 3 months basically. So yeah, so I have to write fast. So it's a lot harder when you've got like you know, most of my first 7 books were 90,000 words, 90 to 100,000 words. The Ray Mallory series is probably a bit longer, so I know that one is about 90 some thousand. Most of this series now, the Braddock and Gray case files, are in closer to 60,000 words, in that range, 50 to 70 depending. So those ones are a lot easier to cram into 3 months. I mean, I just basically have to be really disciplined and just know, okay, I have to turn out a chapter a day, or, you know, 1,500 words or 2,000 words a day. As long as I get those words in every day, I can hit those deadlines. So it's not too tiring and too mentally exhausting to think about. I don't think in terms of, you know, I have to have this book written by this point. I just try to think in bite-sized terms. It makes it less daunting that way. So yeah.
Any last questions?
No, I wonder if she ever gets writer's block.
Oh.
Well, she doesn't plot either, so this stresses
No.
me out
I
greatly.
know. Well, I you know, that's the thing. I don't have the luxury of writer's block, so I have to force myself, even when I don't feel particularly inspired, I have to force myself to come up with something that day. So I just have to get the words on the page. And I find for me, as long as I sit down, I think it helped coming from journalism, honestly, because there were so many days, especially toward the end of my career, where I was so frustrated with things. And it was just like, you know, I was stressed out, and I just thought, oh, you know,
But you got through the day.
I did. I got through the day. And I still, no matter how horrible the day was, what was going on, I had to churn out those words. And so, you just had to do it. And so I think that was a good sort of lesson for me. It was like, if I did that for that job, I can do it for this job. So I just sit my butt in a chair or the bed or wherever I'm working that day. And I just write I just put it whatever words I need to get done that
Do you
day.
just sit in bed and write?
Sometimes.
That sounds delightful.
It's not so good for my back anymore, I have to say. I have to, at one time I could do that all day long. Now I have to get up every so often and stretch.
Do you miss the newsroom?
I absolutely miss the people. I do. It's one thing I do find is that it's a very isolated world when you're writing. Like my readers, bless them, are fantastic. And I've got some really great relationships, but they're digital in a sense, right? I mean, I've been lucky enough to meet some of them, but a lot of it is email or messages or, online. So yeah, it's a bit of a lonely world. So I miss the camaraderie of a newsroom. I miss the camaraderie at courts, just the people I got to know. Like it's really hard letting that go and not having that as part of my daily life anymore. So yeah, that side's hard, but I don't miss the work, which I'm surprised to say because I never thought I would say that. I loved my job. And honestly, I never really stopped loving it, but it was just getting increasingly stressful. And it was just, I was at the point where, as I said, just being, once I sort of got to that over 40 point, my energy levels just dropped and I just didn't have the energy to keep up with it anymore with job cuts and the extra work everybody had to take on. And it was getting harder and harder for me. So that side I don't miss. People, absolutely. Oh,
He just full on wiped out. Is he embarrassed? Maybe a little. Okay.
Oh.
I think that is all the questions I have. Do you guys have any more burning questions for the group? You can always come up and talk to her
Yeah.
too. She's not in a bubble.
Sure.
Thank you
Well, thank
for
you
doing this. I've been meaning to
Aw.
see, the thing about paranormal books is they fit best in October.
Absolutely.
So then I remember in like December and it's like, oh no, we gotta wait like a year. So I'm so glad that we could do this.
Thank you. It was wonderful. I had a lot of fun.
And
And it's nice just hanging out with you.
yes, thank you to everybody here. I'm going
Thank
to
you.
stop recording. Stop. Yes.
Okay.